And then after we've heard Lily's story, we'll hand over to Codename MAXINE, which is a fellow diversity and inclusion group from Deloitte, who will explore the topic of inclusive language and in the context of MuleSoft and our Anypoint platform as well. And then very quick event wrap up on next steps. So in terms of where we are, who we are and where we are today. So first of all, this meetup group is essentially dedicated to MuleSoft practitioners, so developers, architects, and so forth. It was launched in February of this year, so it hasn't. We haven't even had a year yet, but there's been a lot of activity, a lot of momentum, and it's really great to see. So, for example, initially it was launched in America with a group of individuals, and then over the next few months, we've seen it. There's been a group that was also launched in EMEA. So this is our team, and in August we also saw a team being formed in JPAC. So now it truly is a completely global meetup, which is amazing. Again, I know I mentioned we're a fairly new group, but actually we already had 8 meetups to date, which is a huge achievement. So as you can see, there's a lot of activity. And in terms of people who have signed up, we've had already over 500 people across the globe joining various different sessions. So it's really good to see the momentum. Hi, Colleen. Hi, Sabrina. Hi, Alva as well. Really good to have you on board as well. So if you're just joining, please say where you're from. I always love to hear and see what spread we get as well. So in terms of who the team is, who are the meetup leaders. So you can see we have a whole host, a very diverse group across the Americas. In EMEA, we have Emily Patra, who's sponsoring the initiative from our side. And we also have myself and Alva as well, who's here. And in terms of across New Zealand and Australia, we have Arda and Archana as well. So it's a very brief introduction about who we are, where we come, put some names to faces as well. And with that, I don't want to steal too much thunder. I would like to hand over to Lily from Bentley Motors, who will share her wonderful MuleSoft journey with all her accomplishments. So I remember seeing Lilly-Ann present at Connect and sharing some of the work that they had done with MuleSoft. And I remember thinking, oh, that's so impressive. And then recently I've learned that she became a MuleSoft mentor, which is absolutely incredible. So with that, I would like to hand over to Lily, and it's all over to you. Best of luck.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. There we are. And I will introduce myself. Can everyone see okay? All good?
I can see it, sorry. I should have.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So I'm Lily. I'm 20 years old. I'm 2 years now into a 4-year degree apprenticeship at Bentley Motors. So I study digital and technology solutions, and I do a software consultancy pathway. So I'm a software developer normally day to day, but I chose to do IT consultancy to get more of a broad variety of what I'm doing. So my current role is in the digital and corporate innovation team at Bentley, and day to day I work in mobile application, API, and database development. So I run my own projects and work closely with stakeholders to help define scopes, KPIs, and maximise business value. In order to deliver, I collaborate with colleagues across different functions to gain knowledge and expertise to further my development and develop new or improve existing systems and processes. I also do work quite a lot with consultants, which I'll touch on later, because I am one of 2 current permanent members of staff at Bentley who are API developers. or are able to. So it's not my full-time role, but it's quite sought after at Bentley at the moment. So I'm involved with multiple projects across the business, whether that be as the main API developer or assisting in communications with consultants and people that don't have much API knowledge. So I've been using MuleSoft for just under 2 years now, and I'm going to talk you through my journey today. So we'll start off with my sort of initial discovery, the first sort of piece of work that I delivered, and then getting proper to grips with the platform and focusing on delivering a lot. And then the Mule 3 to 4 migration, which I'm sure quite a lot of people have gone through. We did ours quite late, so we had quite a lot of resources, luckily, but it was also a bit stressful. And then sort of incorporating the larger business projects and connecting to multiple different data sources, which I hadn't done before. And then sort of finish with our next steps and with a focus on sort of the Centre for Enablement at Bentley. And you're welcome to obviously ask any questions along the way and answer them at the end. So start off with my discovery. So at the time I was sort of working in mobile app development. I just finished sixth form, which people who aren't from the UK is you finish when you're 18 years old and you either go to university or take a full-time job, or in my case, do a degree apprenticeship. So I'd studied computer science at school, really enjoyed it. And when I first started at Bentley, they wanted app developers. So I started learning Swift, sort of doing some online courses and things like that. And then we got asked to do an application for some key business people, for key people in the business, sort of board members and things like that. And they wanted to access secret data from their mobile phones. So Bentley is part of VW Group, which you may or may not know. And we've got some quite strict procedures to go through in terms of secret data. So it has to be encrypted in transit and at rest. And so it could only really be done through encrypted APIs, which of course we had none, because at the time we only had one MuleSoft API developer. But we also had an ongoing customer centricity project with Salesforce. So we managed to pick up really quickly and connect to some people from MuleSoft through the customer success manager on that project. So it must have been about a week after I first heard MuleSoft from one of the software developers at Bentley that we went down to London for a one-day training. Sort of around the time that COVID was starting to hit, it was a bit crazy. I'd never seen London quite so quiet. I don't think I ever will see it again, because it was before the lockdown, but no one was around. So I did that on the Thursday, and then on the Monday I was supposed to go back to London and do a 5-day Mule fundamentals training, which of course got hit by the lockdown, and I did it from home, which was quite a shock for me because I hadn't really worked from home before. And then also doing training for 5 days was quite difficult because I'd never come across MuleSoft before. But again, the training was great because there was lots of people sort of in a similar position to me, or they maybe had a bit more experience, so we could all help each other. And then the week straight after that, it was all hands on deck to try and deliver my first project. And we had some help from MuleSoft support with that. Oh gosh, sorry. So we're going to my first delivery. So with help from the MuleSoft professional services team, we sort of mapped this little diagram out that you can probably see on the screen. And they were in for 4 weeks. They helped us a lot with sort of going through what our actual requirements were, as well as helping deliver some APIs. So they delivered 3 APIs. At that point, I was mainly shadowing, trying to pick up as much. And then they left after the 3 APIs were delivered. But before doing so, they helped me make a step-by-step guide of how to sort of start off if I wanted to make a new one, and templates of sort of like the templates of APIs, so I could just copy them and make some changes to them, and also help us set up like a domain project and things like that. So I had the 3 working APIs for reference, all these steps and templates, and then of course I was learning through the forum and also YouTube videos if I got stuck. So then I ended up delivering all the APIs, and we had a great time with the secret data. Everyone was really excited to see what opportunities we had. But then I got delivery focused, and I got loads of people asking, can you do this? Can you do this? Because they'd realised what the opportunities were across the business. So it was just API after API request coming in. So obviously I used the code from the MuleSoft team and myself did, and then tried to reuse some of the APIs as much as possible. Obviously, I wasn't quite up to speed with how to sort of reuse them in the best way, but it was just a massive learning curve. Continued learning from the MuleSoft forum, and then I luckily was able to contact customer success manager if I had any really big issues, and had quite a lot of support there. And then I presented at Connect last year. I'm not sure if anyone else was there, but that's a screenshot. It's not the best screenshot, it's the only one I've got, so it's not very flattering. But I presented at Connect, which opened me up to sort of the whole MuleSoft developer connections that I didn't even know existed really before. And obviously I'd seen the forum and people on there, but I just didn't know how big the community really was. And then at the same time, I watched everyone else's presents, and I've lost my train of thought there, sorry. And got ideas from other people and learned how to use the community to have support when required, but also help give it back. And a big sort of point I wanted to make here with a focus on delivery, it's really easy when developing APIs or getting into sort of the rhythm to keep doing the similar things and keep delivering, but not explore other avenues and open up to what the possibilities of MuleSoft, MuleSoft Anypoint platform is to help benefit the business. So then we'll move on to the migration that we had. So we had the initial kickoff. Obviously, the platform upgrade was coming. We left it quite late. There's only a few of us that were doing it, and it kept getting pushed back because there was other stuff that the business wanted. And with the platform upgrade, it really reinforced my learning, especially because I did my Mule training in Mule 4, and then I ended up developing in Mule 3. So I sort of went back and then went forward again, but it really helped me learn. And we also got some consultants in to do the initial kickoff, which was really great for a small business like Bentley in terms of sort of the IT area, with only 2 of us being able to do it, who are full-time people. Consultants really have helped us through this, giving us sort of a lot of knowledge that we don't have in the business. So they took on we took our APIs that we had existing, we decided which ones were the most challenging, and they took those APIs on. They also gave us a cheat sheet, which was really useful, and there's loads of stuff online as well that we found about migrating from Mule 3 to 4. And then after they, just before they left, we had sort of learning sessions to go through what they did and why they did it. And these were recorded, which is really useful. So I'd really recommend to anyone who's going out to consultancy and stuff like that to get recorded sessions and things like that, just so that you can go back and look at it again, because I still look at them now, just to sort of go through them. And they made a lot of suggestions on best practice. And then we had those recordings and we thought, right, let's make some documentation. So this was the first time that myself and the other developer actually started making any knowledge-based articles, which seems a bit stupid, but again, we were just so focused on delivery that we were trying to get things out of the way. And these KBAs were for both each other, so that we were sort of aligning with each other, and also to be utilised to other people that were hoping to get trained up in MuleSoft. And within these KPIs, we tried to sort of research on what other people do, and I've gone through a lot of examples and also asked our customer success manager and the consultants that we actually have on full time at Bentley as well. And then again, in the migration, we got rid of a lot of redundant APIs. Not sure if a lot of people also experience this, but we get asked to make a lot and then they never get used, and vice versa. So upon reflection, we also made a lot of changes and improvements to the initial APIs. It really was a massive project for just the 2 of us to do, but it was quite rewarding. And then obviously more learning. I think with software development, you never really stop learning, but this was quite a big thing in my MuleSoft journey. So I got involved with a project to bring an application for the Bentley customers that already exists, but we outsource it to bring it in-house. And this required APIs that didn't connect to databases that we have at Bentley. So before this, I was only really connecting to databases that I'd set up myself. I made the stored procedures. I knew everything from back to front. And then now I had to sort of look at APIs that were supplied from the wider BW group, and also connecting to the Salesforce customer data, which I never really come across before. So obviously I've mentioned before, we already have a consultancy team full time in the customer centricity program that we have at Bentley with Salesforce. So we sort of utilised a few of them with the knowledge of Bentley, and of course a lot of them have really great MuleSoft knowledge for the proof of concept for this application. And the API development team for this application was a hybrid of myself and another apprentice who had literally just done the training, the 5-day fundamentals training, and then of course the highly experienced consultancy team. So again, I keep saying best practice, but I just was discovering more and more and realizing that some stuff I do just didn't make any sense. Naming conventions and things like that, just really seeing what other people do really does help. It was a lot easier for me to understand what was going on with the development, and very different to my experience from when I first came across MuleSoft, because at that time I'd just done the training, was really fresh, I had no idea what was going on, was just sort of trying to see if something worked, and then if it worked, I was happy. Whereas now I sort of have more experience and I sort of think, well, what's the best way to do this, as opposed to what's the only way that I have the ability to do this. And I still refer to almost all the APIs that I did within this sort of project. So whenever I develop a new API, it's never brand new, it's just basically snippets of stuff that I already have and then a few adaptions. So it's also great because you can look at something, if it's not working quite the way you expect, you can look back at your old stuff. And then, so with this proof of concept, we're actually going to be doing it properly next year. So that's another next step that we have, but I'm going to focus more on the Centre for Enablement that we're going to sort of try and get going at Bentley. So the advantages, I'm going to go over the advantages and things like that. So our next step, we feel now that we have enough understanding as a business, a little bit. Obviously, there's only a few of us, but to take the next step and start sort of focusing on a Centre for Enablement. A lot of our APIs are built just to go to one developer, and then that one developer will use the API in sort of maybe a mobile application or something like that, and then that's it. So we're just really trying to make it visible of what each API does and where can we reuse them, because at Bentley we've got a lot of different departments all across the business who might be outsourcing APIs through like a third, through like a contracting company and not even realise that we might already have one in-house that they're not aware of. Another thing I sort of want to focus on, I'm a developer and it's very easy for me to deliver without the correct documentation if I'm not forced to do it, which isn't great, but I just want to deliver and get things working. I don't want to spend all my time making documentation or maybe follow the right process. Especially when you're submerged into MuleSoft day-to-day, sometimes you forget that other people don't actually understand what you're talking about. It's good if they have something to reference when you're speaking. So the first step we're going to make in our sort of Centre for Enablement is try and get this more visible across the business. It's going to take us quite a lot of time to do, but we're just going to start slow and steady and start with maybe the bigger APIs we have that we think might give the most value, and then sort of trickle down. And then obviously from the next APIs that we develop will start from the beginning. So it's going to be a bit of catching up to do, but hopefully it won't take us too long. So I've sort of mentioned a little bit, or I've mentioned quite a lot now, that there's sort of me and the one in-house developer, we focus a lot more on sort of our enterprise applications that are used within the business to try and make manufacturing a bit of an easier process, get rid of paper, all that kind of stuff, stop people using loads of Excel sheets and losing loads of data and things like that. But then we also have the customer data side. So it's it would be really useful for me to sort of utilize a Centre for Enablement to try and get some of the knowledge to spread across from the customer data side to the enterprise side. And as I'm an apprentice, of course I have to study 1 day a week. I do a lot of projects within university. We don't do dissertations, we do a big project that will count for our grade. I'm in my 3rd year, I also have a 4th year, but in my 3rd year, I do a project which is very similar to the 4th year one. It's basically a mock, but I have to do a project, and I've chosen to do my project as trying to enable the Centre for Excellence at Bentley. So our brief is kind of to identify the current business problem, and the business problem is that there's no visibility at all of what's really going on in MuleSoft unless you know the people that are doing the MuleSoft work. And then sort of look at the requirements, stakeholders, look at current practice, and then look at industry trends, which is really great because we've got this massive community at MuleSoft that I can sort of try and take advantage of and look at what everybody else is doing. And then obviously developing the solution. It's not just going to be done, developed, and that's it. It's going to be forever evolving. But this is really going to be sort of a big project that I'm taking on, along with the customer app that I spoke about before. And then we've sort of kicked this off, had the first sort of conversation, had a workshop here at Bentley. We had one workshop, but we just need to get going now and get the ball rolling. So I'm hoping that if I'm sort of taking ownership of this, that it'll just get the ball rolling a bit. And it's really important to get this right for us at Bentley with the MuleSoft platform. We want to sort of get a happy medium, want it to be productive, because it's not always best for sort of a large, mature organisation like Bentley that's been doing something for 100 years, building cars, and had some IT input over the past few years, to then drop all that IT input and restart it again. It's about sort of rolling back to what we've done and then sort of correcting a few things, and then from now on doing it the right way. And we're going to try to slowly onboard more developers within Bentley, so that I can sort of focus a bit more time on this side of the MuleSoft work that we have going on, but also get more input. And over time, MuleSoft is just becoming more and more requested. People are just requesting more and more APIs off me or the other developer, and it's just getting a lot. But it's really great to see that everybody's starting to see the business value of what we can really do. And I'm really excited to get started on the next step of both mine and Bentley's MuleSoft journey. And I'm excited to see what other possibilities we can unlock. So I might have sped through that a little bit. I don't know if anyone's got any questions.
We have a few questions from the chat. So Trisha's got a few. So question number 1. How did you apply the concept of API-led connectivity approach in your projects? So
actually, this was a mistake we kind of made at the beginning, is that we didn't really do this. We sort of started off just doing an API for a requirement, and it's been something that we've made mistakes with, but it's something that we're very aware of and we're trying to be better at. So that's one of the things that we're trying to sort of hit with this Centre for Enablement kind of piece, is that we need to start looking at API-led connectivity rather than let's build an API just to do this one thing, because in the long term it's much more sustainable to do it that way. But we've just been focusing so much on delivery that it's sort of rolled out of control a little bit.
Yeah, I can relate. When there's a lot of pressure to deliver, you don't have time necessarily to do all the best practice. It's a real challenge to find a balance between actually delivering and making sure you don't accrue technical debt. We have another question. So it's around the Centre for Enablement, and Trisha's saying she can see that that's your next goal. She's curious, are you following the API catalyst to define it?
We're working on going with our customer success guys. There's quite a big group of people that are giving us advice, and we've only really just started looking at it, but we've just seen the opportunities that it can do. So I actually can't tell you. I think there was some discussion about the API catalyst, but from the top of my head now, I actually can't quite remember what that actually was.
Yeah, Catalyst is our methodology. It's a whole host of different resources and assets. And they've recently rebranded it to Knowledge Hub as well for those assets. So just for benefit of everyone else, I guess, even for my customers, I frequently look at it because I'm like, this is right here. So look at this document and it will really help you. Let me see if this. So another question, before you start with a project, are you taking Exchange as the first place to search for connectors?
Yeah, actually, that's one thing that we are doing right. It's not the only thing, but yeah, that's a big thing. And we're trying to also get some people that aren't API developers on Exchange, because at the moment we don't have that. So it would be great if we could have some of our software developers that are using the APIs to be able to sort of get onto Exchange. But we just haven't got around to it yet. So that's something we're hoping to do actually next week. So it is definitely happening. It's going to be great when we can do that, because then they can really see what they're getting back, as opposed to me sending a load of Postman files over to them with example data, and it's great for them to see it straight from Exchange.
Fantastic. We have another question from Nicole. When did you and your team know they wanted to bring in MuleSoft as opposed to another competitive product? So a bit of a controversial question, maybe. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, so we were in a workshop that was 6 hours long, just talking about how we can unlock this secret data. One of the IT colleagues that we had worked with MuleSoft before, but not himself. He wasn't an API developer, but he knew what it was. He sort of said, look into MuleSoft, and then we realized that we already had the ongoing customer centricity project that had that MuleSoft connection. So we went to them, had a chat with them, and we didn't really look anywhere else because they already had the Bentley knowledge. With Bentley, it's very difficult to sort of get new, fresh people in, but also, even if we were looking anywhere else, I think MuleSoft probably is the best sort of platform to use at the moment anyway. From what I've seen, I've had a look at some other stuff, not recently, but just being nosy. But I think, especially all the forums and things like that, it's really, really great to get that support that when there's only 2 developers, it's very difficult to sort of achieve with a software.
I got another question. So how do you balance your work and apprenticeship commitments? So I imagine both require a lot of time.
Stressfully. No, I have university every Friday, so that's just blocked out my diary. No one can put meetings in with me. And then I have every Sunday I put aside the afternoon to do university work. If I have something on that Sunday, then I'll maybe have 3 hours during the week that I split up after my actual work to do some university work. But a lot of the university stuff that I do actually relates a lot to what I do day to day. So I can take my projects, for example, as long as I've got the right write-ups and things like that, I can submit them, and it doesn't actually take me as long as for example, writing like a 16,000 word essay or something like that. So it is manageable. It took me a while at first, but after a while I've sort of gotten used to it, and it's part of my routine now. Just seen the catalyst comment there. Is that, I've got the diagram in my head right now, and I actually asked for it this morning off our customer success manager. I didn't get it through because I was going to put the picture on there and talk through it.
Sorry, I think my internet cut out a little bit. I have a question as well, which came to me while you were speaking. So you mentioned how sorry, I think my internet was being very flaky. Can you hear me?
It might be me. I'm not sure. I'm back now, though, I think.
It's back now, I think, yeah.
I think it was definitely me. No, I just had one quick question. When you were talking about initially connecting to all the different databases, you built it yourself. I was curious where you acquired those skills. Did you do it at sixth form, or where did you learn?
I just saw what worked and then used it, and then looked online again. I think that's the best way of learning, really. I think sometimes getting stuck right into the deep end is the best way. I had some scripts that I found online that I used as sort of a basis, and then from that developed. So the very beginning was very simple, and then after a while I actually put quite a lot of stored procedures into data. If I'm making a new database, I put quite a lot of stored procedures in there. It sort of breaks up where the issues are, I think, sometimes. If I have the ability to do that, if I don't, then I do it from somewhere else.
Fantastic. I think we have no more questions. So again, a lot of comments saying fantastic job, and thank you for sharing the story. And yeah, really, really well done. Thank you for sharing that with us. So with that, what I would like to do is hand it over to the MAXINE team. So if you'd like to share your screen, I don't want to eat away into your time either. And welcome. And please keep the great questions coming along. I like a bit of interaction as well.
Can you see that, Therese? Is it in the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Simran, and I'm here today to represent the Codename MAXINE team, along with 2 more of my colleagues, Sophia and Sabrina. We've got the wonderful Tejas also in the crowd supporting us. So we are the Codename MAXINE team, and we're going to be sharing a little bit with you around our Inclusive Tech Terminology initiative. So before we start off, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who is Codename MAXINE, and then we're really going to get into the meat of today's presentation, which is spotlighting our inclusive tech terminology initiative. So we're going to talk a little bit about why do we actually need inclusive language. Then we're actually going to get into how do we empower our workforce to spot non-inclusive language, whatever firm you work for. And then finally, as sort of everyday technologists, we really want to talk about the tech channels. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can actually embed inclusive language into the everyday products and tools that we use. So let's get started. So welcome to Codename MAXINE. We were actually founded in 2019. Very excited to be here with Therese, who is actually one of our co-founders, back when she used to work with Deloitte. So it's great to come around full circle. We are now 2 years old, and we believe to create an inclusive and supportive network that could uplift women and other underrepresented groups that work with MuleSoft and in the broader technology space. We are a Deloitte run, but also an external facing community. And our mission is really to increase diversity and attract talent, as well as creating a space where we can showcase tech capabilities to do with MuleSoft and strengthen our partnership. So over the last 2 years, we've held the likes of product showcases and MuleSoft demos. And then we've also had discussion panels and community forums, get-togethers, like you can see in some of the pictures on screen now. So to summarize, a key component of our MAXINE's mission is really to look at tech through various angles and push the boundaries on how we can make digital inclusive. So when the Black Lives Matter movement was reignited following the tragic death of George Floyd last year, we felt as a community that we really wanted to centralize conversations on race and the need to advocate for social justice now more than ever before. So as a community, we actually started doing some research around holding an internal event, the focus of which was how can we enable tech to combat social injustice? And it was during the research for this event that we actually discovered an increasingly growing movement of technologists like us who were standing up to change commonly used language in the digital industry because of their potentially racial overtones. So over here, you can see a number of articles that show the hype within the tech space around promoting inclusive language. Our deep dive into the research also helped us uncover a whole subset of discriminatory terms on the basis of sex and neurodiversity too. This change towards more inclusive tech language in the workspace was actually started by Twitter engineers and then became a movement driven from the bottom up. So on screen right now, you can see how Google created new guidelines to publish more inclusive developer documentation, and new repositories that are being created in GitHub are increasingly being promoted to use the word main branch instead of master branch. So there were a lot of related efforts happening at Microsoft's GitHub, at LinkedIn, Apple, Google, and loads of other huge organizations. And so we thought that it was time also for Deloitte and us partnering with MuleSoft to join in and change our defaults. So now we've got you all geared up in understanding why this change is needed. We're going to talk to you a little bit about how to take your workforce on this journey, and then how we as everyday technologists can physically change our product platforms or our tools to incorporate inclusive language. Over to Sophia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simran. So as we've heard already, our words matter, and it's important that we choose them carefully. And using non-inclusive language in technology can and does alienate groups of people, often those who have been systematically and historically excluded already from the tech industry. But how do we convey this and empower employees to spot non-inclusive language in the workplace? Conversations around inclusive language are vital, but we found that awareness does vary. So we thought we'd throw this out to you. and we've put together a quick Menti to try and gauge awareness of non-inclusive language in the room today. So if we can just move on to the Menti now, that's all right. And hopefully in a few seconds, you're going to see some examples of phrases that you might hear colleagues or clients say on projects. If we can, yeah, there we go. Yep, so if you can see the code's just up there, and if you could just get your devices out and put that in, that should connect you to the screen. And essentially the question here is just, how do the words in caps make you feel? So we've got those examples there of phrases that you might hear. The first one, installation takes 16 man hours. The second, let's set up a master-slave model for control. And the third, let's blacklist this malicious website. And we've just put a sliding scale there of very uncomfortable to very comfortable. And just drag it along to how you feel about the use of those words in that sentences. There are no right answers. We just want you to answer honestly, really. So yeah, feel free to fill that in now, if you can connect to that. Any issues still connecting to the Menti? No? All right, okay, cool. So we're seeing some movement there on the man hours section, the master slave model. Yeah, this is really interesting. So we've put this question out before, and we always get slightly different responses. And I think this just goes to show that there are sort of varied levels of awareness in different groups and different organizations. So if you're wondering why we chose these words, they're actually derived from Maxine's 5 non-inclusive terms to challenge, which we're going to discuss a little bit later. But while some of these terms may not make you feel uncomfortable, it's just important to appreciate that the terms we use on a daily basis in the tech world can negatively impact others due to historical context or systemic bias. And our focus today is to challenge ourselves on our own self-education around these terms. So it's good to think about how they might potentially make people in your wider network feel too, as well as just yourself. And we want to just challenge ourselves on how to become more aware of the impact of language on people from other backgrounds. So if we just go on to the next Menti slide now, we're going to put up a word cloud. And again, just ask for a little bit more feedback from you. So we've... any issues getting on to the next one there? Yeah, there we go. So we've mentioned a few non-inclusive terms just now, but we're also here today to expand our understanding of what inclusion means to you. And we just want to know if there's any words that we've missed that you feel exclude yourself or others. These kind of MuleSoft meetings are all about learning. And as much as it seems like you're learning from us, the speakers, we're also really learning from you. So we'd love if you could just submit any words that perhaps you're tired of hearing at work, words that make you uncomfortable. Yeah, guys, is a big one. That make you cringe, that you might have to shrug off or think twice about. And again, this is all anonymous. Don't worry. Don't be shy. It might have been a client, it might have been a colleague, it might have been yourself, where you've used a word and it didn't quite sit right, and you're wondering if there was an alternative that you wanted to question, perhaps. Dummy data, yeah, really interesting. So that's a sort of neurodiversity one. And so we just really want more of an awareness of how our people in the room are feeling. And perhaps we did sort of cover it in those 3 terms earlier, but wherever we can get more information on language that other people are questioning, we try to sort of build out. Yeah, okay, well, we can stop there. Also feel free to add any more into the chat if anything springs to mind as we go along. But thanks so much for your honesty and sharing your thoughts. It's really always good to share perspectives on this and broaden our understanding of what inclusion looks like. And then if we could just go back to next slide. Thanks, Imran. So we've seen that non-inclusive language in the tech industry is pervasive and ubiquitous. But the challenge here really is, how do we start a conversation on this without feeling overwhelmed by just how much work there is that we need to do? So at Maxine, we just decided to narrow our focus and launch Maxine's 5 terms to challenge campaign at Deloitte, which is a way to make small concrete changes that nonetheless have a big impact. So these 5 terms that we've chosen, they sit across 3 buckets. So we've got, oh, I'm sure I'll come back, there we go. So we've got the male default kind of a gendered language category, which you can see man hours, guys fall into. Then the racially charged bucket, where you can see Scrum Master and Master Slave falling into. And then the ableist language bucket, where you can see dummy value. And then on the right there in green, we've put together some suggestions for alternative inclusive language that could be used instead in that context and make just as much sense. And so we found examples of these terms being used in code or in client projects, which you can see below there. So we've got sort of the branch there, or we've got emails that we've been flagging. And then we sort of geared activities towards challenging these internally with more inclusive alternatives. And in almost every case, we found that the inclusive alternative not only made all our colleagues more comfortable, but it was actually really easy to adopt because it was a more precise descriptive term. And so for context, we're really excited to have started rolling out these 5 terms onto client projects, and we're really seeing demand for it now. And this is encouraging use of inclusive language on the ground. So we're moving sort of beyond sort of focus groups into practically start bringing this in. If we just move on to the next slide. And we're conscious that 5 terms doesn't sound like much, perhaps. We know that it's just the start of a much bigger conversation. So we've begun building out our glossary to understand which terms are making us feel uncomfortable and start driving these conversations and the use of more inclusive alternative language around Deloitte and on client projects. So we're growing the glossary in a number of ways by taking on board terms that were raised in focus groups and feedback, as well as in our own research. And this really helps us to constantly review what language we can challenge to build a more inclusive workplace. So you can see a few more examples there, perhaps, which might spark some thoughts for yourselves. And now we've shown you our inclusive language glossary, we'd love for you to continue challenging yourself and thinking about non-inclusive language instances that you might have encountered in your working day or on the MuleSoft platform itself. And we'd really love for you to get interactive. So if you do have any thoughts on this, please drop them in the chat. And while we've spoken about empowering our workforce, we've got a challenge here that if our everyday tools themselves don't contain this language, that's a bit of a problem. So I'm going to hand over now to Sabrina, who's going to discuss ways to tangibly embed inclusive language within the everyday tools that we use.
Thank you, Sophia. So everyone now must be wondering, how can we embed inclusive language across our channels? Well, I'm going to move on and talk about some of the things we have been doing at Deloitte to raise awareness, how we have been encouraging these topical conversations in our workplace, and also we'll be taking a deeper dive into how we have been working with MuleSoft to adopt inclusive terminology across their own channels. So, number 1, the use of awareness campaigns and leadership pledges. The Codename MAXINE group have contributed to many awareness campaigns, as well as receiving leadership pledges across the firm. From a service line perspective, the team have contributed to our yearly analyst induction talks, making sure our new joiners are familiar with the inclusive terminology in the workplace. And by encouraging these conversations to our colleagues who are so early on in their career is extremely important, as they are the ones that are going into the workplace with an open eye and mind. It's also great to hold leadership pledges. They have played a crucial role towards embedding inclusive language across Deloitte's channels and gaining exposure across the firm. In fact, one of our senior leaders even made a pledge of putting £20 in a jar for every time they heard the term guys, with all the funds being raised to charity. Now, we're not saying we all have to be able to afford to do this, but instead just demonstrates a fun way to get your teams involved. Commitment really does trickle down from the leadership straight across through to the firm. Another beneficial way is through the use of focus groups. So to understand the impact and to help identify discomfort levels around specific terms. Holding conversational campaigns on either Teams or Slack or any communication channels has been extremely useful, as people tend to understand that a word had a negative impact, but not necessarily knows the background behind why. You can see in the picture below how we explain this by showing the issue behind the word dummy and then proposed our inclusive alternative fix. And these are just some of the things you can be doing to encourage inclusive terminology in the workplace. So moving on to number 2, the use of comms channel.
Being able to identify and adopt inclusive terminology is absolutely fantastic. However, if we don't embed the language into the tech tools that we use, there is no real way we can adopt inclusive language. Slack is another messaging channel which many of us are all familiar with and often used to work with our colleagues. We worked with our Slack team and found that the comms channel was a great way to start implementing change by beginning to add trigger phrases to some of the words or terminology we use in our workspace. For example, the term blacklist should be replaced with block list, or the term whitelist should be replaced with approved list. So we used the research and the inclusive glossary built to map out phrases we'd want to change. We then worked with our Slack team and started to build and test the inclusive language terms within a Slack test channel, also using filters to test for false positives. And once done, we will eventually look to roll this out across our UK team. The example below shows exactly what I'm explaining. So in the channel, you can customize and add a phrase for the Slack bot to watch out for, and then tell it how to respond. You can add as many trigger phrases as you want, just separate them using a comma as shown below. Now, it doesn't necessarily force the user to use the term, but it allows you to stop, think, and consider what you're about to say. We can move to the next one. So the third and final point is a third way to embed inclusive language is to change product tool code base. Given this is a Women Who Mule event, we thought you'd especially be keen to hear how we at Codename MAXINE have teamed up with MuleSoft's products team to convert non-inclusive instances we spotted in the Anypoint platform into inclusive alternatives. As community set up to specifically support MuleSoft practitioners, last May, we decided to conduct a deep dive into MuleSoft's platforms to see if we ourselves could identify some instances where inclusive terminology could be integrated. So a summary on the 4 areas that we identified at MuleSoft. So a couple of instances are areas we have picked out which we thought could be more inclusive. We have actually taken this to MuleSoft and received sponsorship to help embed inclusive language. For example, we have the runtime fabric notes in training material. So we have the use of master or slave notes, ideally to be adjusted to controller or worker notes. We are now working together on the API policies in the API manager, where you have the terms whitelist and blacklist, ideally to be rephrased as allow list or deny list. The version control of API specs in the design center, using the term master branch, and instead to be replaced with things like main, primary, or default branch. And finally, the use of gendered words across the developer documentation, which we identified while reading through the developer document at docs.mulesoft.com. So we have the male default language, which can be replaced with gender neutral words such as they or their. We then took our findings to MuleSoft, and very excited to announce that we have officially partnered with the product and wider teams to start making changes in their products and training material in favour of inclusive terminology. So apart from MuleSoft tools and docs, we also looked at how we can make some of our own internal code bases more inclusive. So for example, on one project, we looked at updating our core test framework. This is the common test framework used when testing products. And what our team did was move all their test framework infrastructure from the configured master to a new main branch. We couldn't eliminate master entirely since it was ingrained into Git or Bitbucket, but at least we could choose not to use it. On the same project, we also enabled the use of checkstyle rules with test and developer repositories. So once checkstyle rules are added, these send out prompts or warnings to non-inclusive instances. Now, this isn't going to send an error, otherwise this will break the code. We also built a joint client Deloitte Confluence page containing a glossary of inclusive terms, which can be consulted during new product development or data builds. So after taking you through the 3 areas on implementing inclusive terminology and taking a further look at MuleSoft, there is also a few more areas we can continue to implement. these changes in the technology space. So, for example, at Deloitte, we have a respect and inclusion framework. This is basically a team charter we use at the beginning of each of our product, at each of the start of our projects, and we all come up with ways of working. So we added a section on inclusive language into the charter, rolling this out both internally and on our client projects, sharing the initiative with our wider ecosystem and alliance partners, and lastly, incorporating ideas into our CIO and executive program. So hopefully this has helped inspire you to potentially look at how you can embed inclusive language across your firm too. So I'm now going to pass to Simran, who will summarise a few key points we've talked about today.
Yeah, thank you so much, the whole Codename MAXINE team for all of this information. And yeah, as Sabrina said, before we close up, I thought we'd quickly summarize what you can do, regardless of where you work, so that we can actually all start embedding inclusive language into our everyday tech channels across the tech industry. So, as Sophia and Sabrina mentioned, firstly, we started by taking our people on an awareness journey. So these are a couple of things that you can do potentially at your firm to embed inclusive language too, whether it's through community calls or newsletter features, leadership pledges, or conversational campaigns. We found that this has really helped broaden our people's awareness of inclusive language. Number two, we spoke a little bit about how you can use communication tools and think of if there's actually a way to program a bot within our tools that doesn't necessarily police people, but merely nudges or reminds the user when they may have used a non-inclusive word. Thirdly, we looked at how can you actually build inclusive terminology into the products and platforms we use every day by inherently changing the code. So whether this is through the product platform code itself, whether it's on training, developer documentation, or policy documentation, whether it's your core test framework or embedding check style rules within your repositories. And finally, we encourage you all as our audience here today to actually think outside of the box. So beyond your people, tools, and products, where else could you potentially mobilize this shift towards inclusive language? And for us here at Deloitte, that has been embedding it into our Respect and Inclusion team charter, sharing this message with our wider ecosystems and alliance partners, and then also thinking about how do we share the message of inclusive language with our next cohort of senior leadership. So integrating it into our next cohort for our CIO Academy. So thank you everyone for listening in. We really hope that this has motivated you to one, start thinking about the language you use every day, but also to think about where you potentially could start making changes within your own firm to embed inclusive language and really promote inclusivity across the entire tech space. If you have any questions, please do let us know. And if you'd like to get in touch, we have on screen our WhatsApp and LinkedIn QR codes, as well as our email address. And big shout out to Therese for inviting us here today. We absolutely loved it.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for presenting. I actually have a quick question. So when you run the Menti, what were the results for Deloitte in comparison to us or any other times you ran it? Like, I'm just curious how different it is with different groups.
Sophia, do you want to take this question as you've kind of been leading it?
Yeah, I can do. I think generally there tends to be a tendency to view terms like guys or the male default a bit more casually. People seem to be quite comfortable with that. Whereas I think perhaps because of the social climate at the moment, the master-slave particularly seems to make people more uncomfortable when we've done that kind of sliding scale. But when we did the word cloud, we found that what people were most triggered by in terms of what words we saw coming up were more gendered and male default language. So that was quite an interesting one because, yeah, it shows you that they're all sort of relevant and important, and also sort of ableist language was definitely in there as well in the word cloud. So yeah, I think I think we saw some signs of that as well today, but it was, I think, in some of the Deloitte calls we had that was particularly clear.
I have a question from Lily, and she asks, have you found reverse mentoring useful?
Yeah, sure. So we, as part of Deloitte Action Plan, there has been a whole work stream towards, building up reverse mentor partnerships across the firm. Personally, I am reverse mentoring someone as well, and I think inclusive language has definitely come up. I think as Sophia mentioned, initially it does tend to be, people tend not to be as triggered, I guess, by male default language simply because they've grown up using it. And so I think it's inherently, it's like maybe a harder change for people who are further along their careers to make, simply because they've grown up with it. And they might understand like the fact that it could be seen as negative, but they don't necessarily understand the why. And that's I guess why we've been really promoting sort of our conversational campaigns, and building those sort of reverse mentorship partnerships is really helpful, because when you get, the younger generation talking to the older generations, typically, we're allowed to share that sort of education on the like reason that is negatively impacting someone, rather than just labeling it as negative.
Another question, or two questions from Trisha. So question one, is the initiative only available at Deloitte? So I'll let you answer that first.
So yeah, I guess what we've officially branded it as our, inclusive tech terminology initiative. It was something we started at Deloitte, but that we were inspired by other companies like Twitter, like GitHub, that were making a few changes within their code. I think what we've tried to do is at Deloitte realize all the potential places we can make these changes. So, speaking to our people, but also trying to change our product, which is why we've teamed up with MuleSoft, and also trying to change our tools, such as our communication tools, or even some of our internal tool and code bases. I think one of the things we're really excited about coming here today to share this with you is because we are trying to find opportunities to broaden this across other firms. So yes, our team is working really hard to do this in Deloitte, but we also just want to share the message, because it's been really helpful to get our teams, and we've heard back from our people about how they're impacted. And that's why we're sharing it not only with our clients as well, and we actually have clients come to us right now and come up to the client partners and ask them, hey, are you doing anything on inclusive language? And we have a lot of partners reaching out to us right now, to Codename MAXINE directly, to be like, can you share a pack with us? Can you tell us how to talk to our clients about this? Which is great. I think the partnership we're working most closely with is definitely MuleSoft, but we're finding ways and means to start out at other ecosystems and alliance partners too. But please, if you are inspired at all, we're very happy to have conversations with you on how you can, start doing this on your firm as well. Please make use of the slides if they do get sent out, or if they don't, please reach out to us, and we'll help you where we can.
And another question, which I often find quite hard to answer or know how best to navigate, but how do you approach your colleagues or wider ecosystem when they're using non-inclusive language?
Sabrina, Sophia, do you want to add anything? I can speak a little bit to my own personal experience. Yep, so I think personally it is quite awkward, but at first, but what I found is that actually just replying in the moment and saying, hey, I noticed the word guys was being used, maybe we could use this instead. That has been surprisingly easily accepted. People have just nodded and been like, that's a really good point. Thanks for thanks for shouting it out. I think in the moment, you know, it might seem quite daunting or a little bit awkward, but if you say it with quite a confident and, you know, chill tone, it's not a policing tone or something quite negative. It does really tend to help. There are other times though I've let it slide accidentally and then realized after I really wish I'd said something, you know, especially in the case of bigger meetings. And sometimes I find it quite helpful to, you know, personally message someone and say, hey, I noticed you use this, you know, I've done it before too. And I think sharing that, the fact that it's more of a people conversation, explaining that, you know, I've made that mistake before too, or I've heard other people using it, but, you know, been hearing great things about this inclusive tech terminology initiative, and it inspired me to want to say something. You know, kind of bringing in what you've been hearing outside, but also how you might have made that mistake yourself too.
And just to add on to Simran's point as well, I think the tone is probably the most important thing as well. You know, not coming out as if it's in an aggressive way at all, or making people feel that they have to say or use certain terms. Instead, it's just pointing out, oh, hey, you can maybe think about using this term instead, or this phrase instead. And you'll be surprised that it's more of like an eye-opener situation. I feel like when you're in this situation and you hear someone and you don't quite know how to approach someone, it's a lot easier than it seems, I think, for sure.
Fantastic. I think that's all for the questions. Big thank you, Codename MAXINE team and all the presenters. I'll quickly wrap up the event and let you all get on with your days. So if you mind, stop sharing for a second. And again, big thank you. Thank you very much. So hopefully you can all see that. So again, thank you to Lily, thank you, Sophia, Simran, Sabrina. I mean, I've learned new things, and it's always so exciting to see the progress that we're making in this space as well. So big well done for sharing with our community. I've genuinely really appreciated your time. And I hope the audience have found it, I mean, just by judging by the comments as well, you can see the great feedback and how much people appreciate what you're doing. So in terms of event wrap up, so again, if you really enjoyed this, please share, tweet, post it on LinkedIn. If you're looking forward to joining more events, sign up to the group so then you can get notified when new events are published again. And if something that you heard today inspired you, or you have ideas what you would like to explore, please just get in contact. I'm more than happy to have members of the community present a topic, or if there's an area you would like us to explore, or have like source speakers, so if you have ideas for topics, please just contact me. I'm very flexible, very happy. End of the day, I want to make sure that, you know, we're staying true to what you want and what you're looking for. And with that, as I say, my aim today is to keep it short and sweet and keep the main spotlight on the presenters. So big thank you. You are free to go. I am going to stop the recording as well. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the session. Thanks again to all the presenters.